Let's go ahead on the record in case number 2021CR170, captioned State of Kansas versus Don Burns. Would the parties announce their appearances, please?
May it please the court, Christopher Schneider, Assistant District Attorney, appears on behalf of the state of Kansas.
May it please the court, David Matthews appears on behalf of defendant Don Burns, who is in Andrew County on video.
All right. We are here set down for a plea hearing. I would ask you folks, I don't think we've had a preliminary or a waiver thereof. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Matthews, have you had a chance to talk to Ms. Burns about a right to preliminary hearing, what she wants to do today?
I have, Your Honor, and it's my understanding she would waive preliminary hearing.
Is that correct, Ms. Burns?
Yes, it is.
All right. And Mr. Schneider, on behalf of the state, do you waive prelim as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. We'll find both parties have waived preliminary hearing, bind the defendant over for trial as charged, and enter temporary not guilty pleas until we're done with today's hearing. All right, Ms. Burns, that means we're ready to take up your plea today. So while we do this, I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions.
Okay.
If at any time I ask you something and you don't understand me, tell me that, and you and I will talk about it until we're sure we're on the same page, okay?
Okay. Yes, Your Honor.
If at any time you want to talk to Mr. Matthews in private before you answer one of my questions, I'll give you that opportunity. You just tell me and I can send you guys to a private room to talk, okay?
Okay, sir.
All right. So to start this all off, I have to have you sworn in. So if you'd raise your right hand, my court reporter will swear you in.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Burns, how far did you go in school?
I got my GED, sir.
Good. You reading right okay?
Yes.
All right.
Well, not right, because I have that crippling rheumatoid arthritis.
All right. So you know how to do it. You just physically you're kind of getting disabled where it's hard for you, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As you sit here today, are you under the influence of any alcohol, drugs, or prescription medicine that might cloud your mind, keep you from understanding what you're doing?
No, Your Honor.
Feel like your mind's clear today?
Yes, it is.
All right. Do you know what you're charged with?
Yes, for not registering.
All right. And you know that you don't have to change your plea from one of not guilty to guilty. If you wanted to maintain your not guilty plea, you would have an absolute right to a jury trial in this case. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
At that trial, the state would have to put on enough evidence to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You wouldn't have to prove anything yourself. Mr. Matthews would help you throughout that trial. He could cross-examine and confront all of the state's witnesses, challenge their evidence. He could call any witnesses you wanted to call. And if they didn't want to come to court, he could use the subpoena power of the court to make them come. At that trial, you'd have a right to testify, but you'd also have a right not to testify. And if you decided not to take the stand, the state couldn't use that against you to argue you must be guilty for not giving your side. You understand all those rights?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
So if we had that trial and at the end of that trial you were convicted, you would have a right to appeal that conviction to the Kansas appellate courts. If you didn't have the money to do that, a lawyer would be appointed to do it for you. You understand all that?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Okay. So if we go forward with this plea today, there's not going to be any kind of trial of any kind, and you're going to be giving up all of those rights that I just went over with you. You understand that?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
All right. I'm going to share right now the copy of the plea petition that Mr. Matthews shared with me. And I'll ask you when I get to the top of it there. Can you see that document?
Yes, I can, Your Honor.
Does that look like the document that you and Mr. Matthews went over?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
All right. Did you feel like you understood everything in it?
Yes, I did.
Was Mr. Matthews able to answer any questions you might have about anything in it?
He answered everything I needed to know.
All right. So I'm going down here to what we call the plea agreement, and I'm going to read this to you so I can make sure that we all understand what the agreement is. It says that you're going to be pleading guilty to counts 1 and 2, which are both violation of the Kansas Registration Act. And the parties are going to agree to recommend to run the sentences consecutively to each other, but also to recommend a dispositional departure to grant you probation. Is that your understanding of the entire plea agreement?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
Has anybody promised you anything other than that to get you to plead guilty today?
No,
Has anybody placed any force or threats against you to make you plead guilty today?
no.
All right. Mr. Matthews, Mr. Schneider, do you guys have an idea of what Ms. Burns' criminal history score will be?
I believe an F, Your Honor.
I would agree.
All right. So I assume that Mr. Matthews went over with you the sentencing grid where it finds where they believe your criminal history score will be, and then it crosses over with the level of conviction to tell you what kind of sentence you might expect. Is that true?
Yes, that's true, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, I don't know what your criminal history is, and it won't be official until there's a PSI and everybody gets to comment on it. So for the purposes of today's hearing, I have to assume you have the very worst criminal history so I can advise you what the maximum that anybody can get for this crime is. You understand that?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
All right. And I see up here, it says that the maximum for this is 46 months imprisonment and a fine of $100,000 with post-release of 24 months. Now that would be for the first count. There's also that second count. Now in the second count, no matter what your criminal history score would be, you would be scored as an I for any secondary accounts. In other words, the less. And I believe that the aggravated box for the I is it 19 months? Would that be right?
I think so.
Yes.
19 months for a total of 65 months as the maximum for these two together, and a fine of $200,000, which would be the two fines together. But the post-release remains at 24 months. Do you understand? I've kind of changed it from this document, and I want to make sure you understand. If you put the two counts together, the most that anybody could get would be 65 months in prison and a fine of $200,000. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
All right. And since it's different than what's here on the paper, I just want to make sure, do you have any questions about that?
No, I can understand it. Yes, sir.
Okay, good deal. All right. Now I see that the lawyers are going to make a recommendation as to what the sentence should be. In other words, that they should be run consecutive or one after the other, and that they're going to recommend that I give you probation. You understand, while I'm going to listen really closely and take that all into great consideration, I'm not bound by any of those agreements, and I can give you any sentence that the law allows me to. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Do you have any questions for me, Ms. Burns, at this time about anything that you and I have gone over today?
No, I can understand everything, Your Honor.
All right. And knowing all this, do you still want to go forward with this plea?
I want to go forward with it.
All right. Mr. Matthews, do you know any legal reason why your client should not plead guilty?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Then I'm going to ask you, as to count one, charging you with violation of the Kansas Registration Act. Help me out. Is level
Judge.
6?
It is, Judge. And Judge, that I need to interject here if the court will allow.
Sure.
These are charged as person felonies. I would ask that the information be amended by interlineation, and I'll file a clean amended, but
Okay.
to make them non-person felonies. These should be level 6 non-person felonies.
Right. Right. And I assume, Mr. Matthews, you agree and don't object to that.
Do not object, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. So count one is a violation of the Kansas Registration Act. It is a severity level 6 non-person felony. As to that charge, how do you plead? Guilty or not guilty?
I plead guilty.
All right. As to count two, charging you with the same violation of the Kansas Registration Act, the same severity level 6 non-person felony, how do you plead to that charge? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
All right. I'm going to ask Mr. Schneider to tell me what he thinks the evidence would be if this went to trial. I want you to listen because when he's done, I'm going to ask you if that's what happened, okay?
Okay.
Mr. Schneider.
Yes, Your Honor. If evidence were to be presented, it would show that on November 2nd, 2007, the defendant was convicted in this court of the crime of sale of cocaine in case number 2007 CR 648. As a result of that conviction, she is required under the Offender Registration Act and amendments thereto to register with the sheriff in the county in which she resides, attends school, or is employed for a period of 15 years. She's required to register in the month of her birth and every 3, 6, and 9 months thereafter. Her date of birth is August 14th, 1968, which means she is required to register in the months of August, November, February, and May. Judge, during the month of August 2018, while a resident of Wyandotte County, the respondent, or the defendant, excuse me, failed to register with the sheriff of Wyandotte County pursuant to the Offender Registration Act. Your Honor, that same statute makes each succeeding 30-day period in which the defendant does not register a separate and distinct offense. And Judge, between the first day of November of 2018 and the 30th of September 2018, excuse me, and the 30th day of September 2018, the defendant, again, while a resident of Wyandotte County, failed to register with the sheriff.
All right. Ms. Burns, you heard what the prosecutor had to say. Is that what happened in this case?
Yes, that's what happened. I was getting surgery on my hands, and so that's why I didn't go and register. I was having difficulty with my health at that present time, Your Honor. But
All
yes,
right.
I do understand.
Thank you. I will find the defendant has freely, voluntarily, and intelligently entered into this plea. She knows the nature of the charges and the consequences of the plea. The state has provided a sufficient factual basis for a finding of guilt, and the defendant has acknowledged that factual basis. Therefore, I will find her guilty of counts 1 and 2, both violations of the Kansas Registration Act, severity level 6, non-person felonies. Pursuant to the plea, all other charges are dismissed. I'm going to order a pre-sentence investigation and set this for a sentencing. Let's talk about sentencing dates. I think I've kind of filled up my May 28th because Mr. Schneider, I know, is not available at 11, which is the only time I have available. So
Sorry
what if
about
we
that,
did,
Judge.
huh?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. What if we looked at June 4th and made it 9 o'clock in the morning?
Judge, could we go the next week? I'm having surgery that week, so
The 11th at 9 o'clock in the morning.
that would be fine.
That will work.
All right. That's when I'm going to set sentencing for. Dave, can you get a pre-sentence investigation request over to probation? I can email you a blank one if you need it.
Judge, I've already filled one out and I emailed it to you, but I'll send it to probation
Awesome.
as well.
Okay, fantastic. So let me ask you this, since it seems like the parties are agreeing to recommend probation, is there a bond motion, Mr. Matthews?
Yes, Your Honor, I would ask the court to grant an OR bond based on the recommendations of the parties and based on the fact that it's a registration.
Mr. Schneider?
Judge, I don't have any philosophical objection with that. I would ask that she be screened by pretrial services. So, I mean, obviously the reason she's here is because she's had difficulty reporting to the folks she's supposed to report to, but I really don't see a whole lot of point, given the plea agreement in this case, to that if she meets the qualifications to warehouse her for 2 months.
Yeah, I'm going to order a screen for a pretrial services bond. All right, so Ms. Burns, here, unfortunately, here's what I think is going to happen. I think they just sent you to Andrew County. They're probably going to bring you back so that my pretrial service people can interview you and see if they can give you an OR bond where you'll have to report to them, okay?
Okay, yes, sir.
All right, so that'll get you out. Here's a couple of things. So, and then they're gonna have a pre-sentence investigation done and we'll come back for sentencing on that day. Make sure you keep in touch with Mr. Matthews during that time, okay?
Okay, I sure will, Your Honor.
All right, and I'll tell you, kind of my position on this registration act. I'm glad that the state's very reasonable about agreeing to let people have probation because I think that the consequences for it are too harsh. That's my own opinion. But I can tell you this, most people that I come across, they're not people who are trying to hide or not there. They just, for whatever reason, aren't able to take care of business and get their registration done. It only gets worse every time because each one counts as a conviction and then you have to do the probation. So you're facing actually the old ones and the new ones if you catch any new cases. So make sure that you do what you need to do to be able to get that registration done, okay?
Yes, sir, I sure will.
All right. And I have to tell you today, as a convicted felon, it's prohibited for you to own or possess a firearm, certain kind of deadly cutting instruments like dirks, daggers, switchblades, basically knives that could be considered deadly weapons. While this is not a registration offense, your requirement for registration in the underlying offense remains, and you need to make sure you take care of that, okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, I will, Your Honor.
All right, Miss Burns. Well, I'll keep a track and make sure that they get up and see you and try and get you out of there, okay?
Okay, yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Mr. Matthews and Mr. Snyder. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Good luck,
you.
ma'am.
Anything
Okay.
else for our record?
Yes, Judge, two matters. One, the sentencing is presumed to be by Zoom at this point?
Yes.
Okay. And second, Judge, Mr. Matthews, I think at the same time he emailed you the plea petition, emailed it to me. I, of course, looked at it before the hearing. I saw it when you were sharing your screen with us. It's in a PDF format, so I can't electronically sign it. As we did in a hearing earlier today, I would ask to be placed on the record that I have approved it, and if the court would so note on the document.
I will do that, and then I'll see to it that it's filed.
Thank you, Judge.
Great. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.